of Acts, latter few verses of chapter 24, and then we'll get into the questions for that chapter and get into chapter 25, hopefully tonight. Before we do that, let's take a look at the chapter titles. See what we've got. What was chapter 6 and 7? Get your cheat sheets out quick. 6 and 7, huh?
Stephen's death.
There you go. Stephen's arrest and death. All right. 2.
Church established.
Church is established. All right. 3 and 4. There you go. 5. Death of Ananias and Sapphira. 1. Jesus' ascension. All right. 8. Conversion of the eunuch. All right. 11.
Christians first call.
Christians first in Antioch. All right. 13 and 14. Paul's first journey. Good. 9. Conversion of Saul. Good. 10. Conversion of Cornelius. All right. 12. All right. 15. Jerusalem Conference. 16. Conversion of the jailer. There you go. 17 and 18. Paul's second journey. All right. 21, 22. Paul's what? Arrest and defense. Okay. 23.
Before the Sanhedrin.
All right. 24.
Defense before peace.
All right. And I think I got 19 and 20. What's that one? Third journey. Okay. And 25. Haven't I given it to you? Ah, gotcha. All right, 25. Let's go with Paul's defense before Festus. Paul's defense before Festus, chapter 25.
Festus.
Yeah.
Festus, not Gunsmoke. All right. Okay, chapter Titus. All right, well, let's get into the latter part of chapter 24 because they work hand in glove with each other. And there's once we get to the last verse, verse 27, it'll start to make sense as we pick up 25. Nick, you want to start reading there for me and read? Let's start with verse 24 and read to the end of the chapter for me.
And after certain days, when Felix came with his wife,
Drusilla.
Which was a Jewess, he sent for Paul and heard him concerning the faith in Christ. And as he reasoned of righteousness, temperance, and judgment to come, Felix trembled and answered, Go thy way for this time. When I have a convenient season, I will call for thee. He hoped also that money should have been given him of Paul, that he might lose him. Wherefore he sent for him the offenders and communed with him. But after 2 years, Porcius Festus came into Felix's room, and Felix, willing to shew the Jews a pleasure, left Paul bound.
Okay. The end of the reign here, or the end of the time period for Felix is right here, and things come together, and Paul is in front of him, and obviously in Billy's sermon here a few weeks ago talked about the ideas of righteousness and self-control and judgment and so forth. And these items bothered Felix big time. I mean, when a crook hears what's going on and what he's doing, it can make him squirm. And that's exactly, we've talked about the caliber of this guy, and that's what he was. Okay? And we get that picture even more clear as you see the verses that come about this. Now, he's bothered with all of this, and he makes the statement that we remember of chapter 24, where he says, go away for the present, and when I find a time, I will summon you, or when I find a convenient time, or words to that effect. As far as we know, that never happened. As far as the biblical account of him is concerned, we don't have a record of that. It could have, but it's doubtful. Okay, I'll just tell you, because when you get to the next verse, it says, and at the same time, too, he was hoping that money would be given him by Paul. Therefore, he also used to send for him quite often and to converse with him. It was all about a payoff. It was all about give me the money, and for the right amount of money, you can go. That type of thing. He still doesn't have a reason, a charge to hold Paul. He is, in effect, providing military security for Paul at this point, and he's got him in custody, and he doesn't have a reason why. He doesn't have anything to go on except if I turn him loose, the Jews are going to tear him apart. That's all he's got. Okay? So that's what's going on. And this isn't a day or a week or a month or whatever. Verse 27, 2 years of this. 2 years of this being held in custody like this back and forth going on. And then finally, he's going to be taken out of the picture here, and a replacement's going to take care of him. But Festus will be his replacement. We'll talk about him because that goes big time into chapter 25, and we'll do that. But you see the progression of things, and you can already begin to understand and see the road that Paul's going to have to go down to finally get things accomplished the way it's going to have to be accomplished. And it becomes very, very clear in chapter 25 what he has to do to make this happen. But for the moment, that's where he's at as the guard changes here, as Felix leaves and Festus takes on. So let's do the questions on 24. Let's take a look at that and wrap this chapter up so that we can go on with 25 tonight. Okay? Who was the spokesman for the Jews against Paul? Tertullus. Okay. What sect did the Jews say Paul was a ringleader? Nazarene. Okay. What accusations were made against Paul?
Sedition, heresy, Satan.
Okay. What do you do about the temple? Profaning the temple. That's what they thought. Did Paul's real accusers personally face him before Felix?
No.
Nope. The guys from Asia went back home. Why did Felix delay judgment in Paul's case?
Waiting for Lysias, the commander, to come.
Right. Waiting for the guy who pulled him out of the mess in Jerusalem, waiting for Claudius Lysias to make the trip down there. How restrictive was Paul's imprisonment in Caesarea?
He had liberty.
He had freedom to walk around.
Yes and no. What did you say?
Liberty.
Liberty. All right. Yeah. People could come see him. People could take care of his needs as they needed. But he wasn't like jailed. like we would think of it. Okay. He had some liberty.
He had an ankle bracelet, so to speak of.
He
today.
had a tag on his ankle where they could catch him by the barcode on the computer. No, I don't think so. 7. Okay, who was Felix's wife? Keep that name in mind. We're going to come back to her here shortly. How did Felix respond to Paul's preaching? Trembled and was bothered by it. Didn't fix it, but was bothered by it. Why did Felix frequently call on Paul? That's right. Wanting a payoff. That's right. Who replaced Felix as governor of Caesarea? Festus. All right. Let's get some definitions here real quick. What was an orator? A what?
Talker.
Yeah, he was a mouthpiece. Yeah, lawyer, speaker, whatever you want to call him. Okay. How about clemency?
Mercy.
Okay. Leniency, forgiveness, that kind of thing. Tumult. I'm sorry? Uproar, confusion, commotion, etc., etc. Okay, as far as the Bible reveals, did Felix ever find a convenient season to obey the gospel? No. What about people today who wait for a convenient time to obey? They sure can. They certainly can. And if they don't take care of it, it becomes too late. Becomes too late. Okay, any thoughts on 24? All right. 25 is a good one to take a look at. When we find the name Festus, the very first word in chapter 25, and he's going to be the new governor. And he comes into office here, if you will, and it says here, therefore, having arrived in the province, 3 days later he went up to Jerusalem from Caesarea. And the chief priests and the leading men of the Jews brought charges against Paul, and they were urging him, requesting a concession against Paul that he might have him brought to Jerusalem, at the same time setting an ambush to kill him on the way. Long story short, as this starts out, Festus is no more on, doesn't have his chair warmed up, okay? Doesn't have his chair warmed up till he's off to Jerusalem from Caesarea. We've talked about Caesarea and Jerusalem and how the journey, the miles that you need to accomplish to get over there. And so he's a prominent figure as far as the Roman family was concerned. But his time in office at this point is going to be short-lived. Basically 2 years, according to history. Okay, he's in office at AD 60 to 62, and succeeded by a ruler by the name of Albinus, Albinus. And this guy was a piece of work. And he was as ugly as it got, as far as the way he treated people and the way he took care of things and that kind of thing. But anyway, at this point in time, Festus is the man. And no more gets into position. No more than gets there until he takes off to Jerusalem. And the first thing that happens is he gets there. The Jews get a hold of him. And after 2 years of confinement, the first topic to be discussed by the Jews with Festus was Paul. Can you imagine holding on to this long? I mean, the majority of things would have been forgotten in 2 years. Okay? But not so here. And so he doesn't anymore get to Jerusalem until they start leaning on him real hard about what Paul's situation is. Why did the Jews want Paul brought to Jerusalem?
Well, they could kill him.
That's the bottom line right there. I mean, but the pretense is different, isn't it? The pretense is different. Because the chief priests and the leading men request that a favor from Festus in that he be brought down there. And of course the idea would be, and you know how it is when you get a new boss. You know, you just string him along and you do whatever, and finally he'll wise up to what you're doing. But in the meantime, and that's what they're doing. They're playing it here. Go ahead.
You talk about the people. You remember Paul for 2 years. Hey, I've been around the Church of Christ most of my life, and they've never lit up on the Church of Christ. People ain't, and the thing about it is, half of the Church of Christ is going with that bunch, with the people.
Yeah, that makes it. That makes it tough.
And Paul was preaching a whole lot stronger stuff than I ever heard.
But you know, really, when it gets down to it, and we'll see that here. We'll see that in what's going on here. The issue, as far as Paul is concerned, is the fact that he's preaching Jesus Christ as a resurrected person, resurrected one from the dead. And the Sadducees are driving this. They're pushing hard on this because that's not what they believe. And they're leaning hard on this situation like that. Go ahead, Billy.
Well, probably too, one of the reasons that this is stayed alive for 2 years. He's had all this liberty for people to come and go, and these people that has, been against him from the get-go, they're probably watching all these people going to and fro, and they're saying, look, we got him in jail, we got him bound, but we still can't stop him. The only way out of this to really stop him is to get him killed.
Exactly.
That's the only thing we can do to stop him.
And plus the fact we already know that effort has been tried once.
Yeah.
And it didn't work. They thought they had him dead before.
They stopped.
And it didn't work. So, it's a tough deal here. So what does Festus agree to do? Let's pick it up and take a look. Festus then answered that Paul was being kept in custody at Caesarea, and that he himself was about to leave shortly. Therefore he said, let the influential men among you go there with me, and if there is anything wrong about the man, let them prosecute him. And after he had spent not more than 8 or 10 days among them, he went down to Caesarea, and on the next day he took his seat at the tribunal and ordered Paul to be brought. And after he had arrived, the Jews who came down from Jerusalem stood around him, bringing many serious charges against him, which they could not prove. While Paul said in his own defense, I have committed no offense either against the law of the Jews or against the temple or against Caesar. So he agrees at this point to go back to Caesarea, and you guys that have got the burr under your saddle, you come with me. And we'll talk about this, and if there's something here, I'll take care of it. Okay? You know, that kind of thing. Now you got to understand, this guy hasn't been in office long. So he's got all the political nonsense to live through that he has to deal with, of which this is part of. He's just trying to appease people at this point and to try to keep this thing under control as best as he can. So they agreed, they go, and so he remains in Jerusalem a few more days, and then he heads back to Caesarea. So as Paul stands before Festus, and charges are presented against Paul, there are all kinds of, Paul just very plainly says, I've committed no offense against the law of the Jews or against the temple or against, I haven't done anything that they've said. And they, and of course it said up there a minute ago in a verse above that they couldn't prove the accusations they were making, so it made it easy. Paul, I didn't do it. I haven't committed. Go ahead.
But in their minds, if he's preaching Jesus, another religion of sorts, isn't that profaning the temple in their minds probably?
I think more, it could have been, but I think the thing that really was driving it home was the fact they thought that Paul had taken a Gentile in or Greek into the temple, and I think that's what they're really hanging their hat on. And that issue there, of course, that's and again, the verse simply points out they thought that he had. They didn't know for sure, but they just thought he had. That gets down to I said, you said, type of thing. So anyway, that's where it's at. So Festus has got a spot where he's seeing what's going on here, and Paul answers in the way that just says, you didn't prove it, I didn't do it, so why are we continuing this? So there's a request that's going to be made, and Festus has to take a position now. In verse 9 it says, but Festus, wishing to do the Jews a favor, answered Paul and said, are you willing to go up to Jerusalem and stand trial on these charges? Hello, I didn't ride in here on a truckload of tomatoes. No. Paul said, I'm standing at Caesar's tribunal, where I ought to be tried. I have done no wrong to the Jews, as you also very well know. If I am a wrongdoer and have committed anything worthy of death, I do not refuse to die. But if I have done but if none of the things is true which these men accuse me of, no one can hand me over to them. I appeal to Caesar. And when Festus had conferred with his council and answered, you have appealed to Caesar you shall go. And when several days were elapsed, King Agrippa, and let me stop there at verse 13 a minute. So here's where the request starts to really get thick. Okay? He's trying to wave the carrot in front of him and say, okay, all right, now if it's that big of a deal, why don't you go up to Jerusalem and let's talk about that and see what's going on. Well, Festus' sense of justice is overtaken to try to be popular with the Jews. The verse plainly says that. To do the Jews a favor, we'll wave this out here like a piece of bait to a bunch of wolves. Okay? Paul says, I ain't going to play this game twice. I'm not going to go down this road again. Wilt thou go up to Jerusalem and there be judged before me? And Paul well understood what that meant. I'm sorry? Sure. But Paul's already in Caesarea because of the plot that they had against him to kill him while he was there. I'm going to go back to that? No, I don't think so. And go ahead.
Well, these guys here, according to verse 3 here, they were already, they still had the ambush set up for him. If we didn't get him when he went down, but if we can get him coming back Festus ain't gonna put him under heavy guard, and
There you go.
we'll take care of it.
Paul knows this. Paul, he well understood what the driving force was behind this. Get me on the road, get me away from protection, and that's what they're after. And he understood that. He had not forgotten the vow. First of all, he hadn't forgotten the vow that was taken, causing him to go to Caesarea in the first place. And secondly, he knows that these guys are not letting up. This isn't going to work. And so then he makes then the appeal to Caesar, and this was his right to do as a Roman citizen, and he could do that. He appeals to Caesar, and of course then it says if you've appealed to Caesar, and to Caesar you're going to go. That's an interesting observation. He could have done something differently. Okay, because according to Roman law, he did not have to accept that plea. He could have said, no, I'm going to take care of this, and you're not going to go to him. But if he did, he mighty well better understand that he better have a good reason for not sending this guy to Caesar. And he didn't have it. He knew that. And so he just decides, okay, if that's what's going to need to be, you're going to go, and that's his right to go. That's his right to go as being a Roman citizen. Billy, do you have something?
Well, I was just gonna add, when you said that, that's one reason that he did not refuse, is simply because they had not made a charge that could stick. You know, it's like you said a while ago, he says, I say.
Yeah.
You know, if they'd had the right proof, you know, he may have not have got that opportunity.
Now the way this process normally worked in a Roman court, like he's in at this point, according to history, the proceedings at this point immediately stopped. Okay? Whatever was going on, stopped. You've appealed to Caesar. This is going to stop right here. And to Rome you go. Okay? And so that was the idea. The thing is suspended. The prisoner and accusers then were sent to Rome. Now, this just didn't happen in 5 minutes. Bear in mind, we're in Jerusalem. Rome is halfway around the planet, really, from where they got to go. And so it's going to take time to get there. And not only is it going to take time to get there, it's going to take time for your accusers and or witnesses and or all of that to take place. This could add tons of time to the ultimate release of a prisoner. So people who were Romans knew that. And so if that, they really had to think twice because of the time element of it all, particularly if they were innocent, type of thing. And so that was but Paul's already got the word. He's going to go to Rome. And he already knows that. Okay? And so this wasn't a problem as far as he was concerned. The appeal was not a request for protection by a citizen, but a citizen requesting the military to release one who was unjustly held in confinement. I mean, there's no charges here. You guys are just saying, I got to stay in jail. Really? So that's what's going on. So now imagine trying to write that to the boss. You're going to look pretty dumb in doing something like that. I'm sending this guy to you, but I got no real reason to tell you why. And so it's a problem. And Festus knows that he's got a problem in that regard. So that's what takes place. And as he then continues this appeal procedure, call it what you will, but he gets some relief here. As he makes this appeal, this appeal prevents several things. It prevents him from being subjected to a second opportunity to be killed, for one thing. But secondly, the appeal now would subject Paul to the trip to Rome as a prisoner under military guard. That wasn't going to be fun. I mean, you didn't get a luxury liner. You didn't get first class seats. You're lucky to get on a grain ship and sit on a sack of feed from here to there. Yeah. I mean, it was not going to be a fun situation. And of course, we'll be able to see that as it goes. And further delays, as we said, would be experienced waiting on people to show up there. And the Roman court system itself could cause delays in for him. But in the process of that, and in the waiting to arrange all of this and so forth, Festus thinks he gets some relief as Agrippa shows up. Agrippa shows up in verse 13. King Agrippa is one of the Herods. I mean, it's Herod Agrippa. I mean, it's one of the one of that family. And it was a normal custom among officials at that time to visit to, like we said, Festus has just received his position, to congratulate him on getting that position. And so he's politically mending fences or keeping fences mended and coming by and seeing him there. Now, according to history, Agrippa was the son of Herod Agrippa, the Herod who killed James, now king of a small district in East Jordan. And so he is there, and this is the Agrippa that we're speaking of, that he's going to be. He's familiar with Jewish law. The Herods were. The Herods were familiar with the Jewish religion. They were familiar, particularly they're familiar with the Pharisees and the Sadducees. They know the differences. They know all about that. So Festus looks at this and says, yes, I may have a way out. I may have a way out, but it's not going to go that way. It's not going to go that way. And so, as King Agrippa and Bernice arrive in Caesarea, verse 13, and paid their respects to Festus. Bernice is an interesting one as well. Believe it or not, you remember Drusilla? A minute ago I said, remember her name? Bernice is her sister. Two snakes from the same family. Okay? Two snakes. And so neither one of them are society's finest by a long shot. Okay? But this is who is on the arm of King Agrippa as he shows up and is there. And so verse 14, and while they were spending many days there, Festus laid Paul's case before the king, saying, there's a certain man left, a prisoner by Felix. And when I was in Jerusalem, the chief priests and the elders of the Jews brought charges against him, asking for a sentence of condemnation upon him. And I answered them that it is not the custom of the Romans to stand over any man before the accused meets his accusers face to face and has the opportunity to make his defense against the charges. And so after they had assembled here, I made no delay, but had on the next day took my seat on the tribunal and ordered the man to be brought. And when the accusers stood up, they began bringing charges against him, not in such crimes as I was expecting, but they simply had points of disagreement with them about their own religion and about a certain dead man, Jesus, whom Paul asserted to be alive. And being at a loss how to investigate such matters, I asked whether he was willing to go up to Jerusalem and there stand trial on these matters. But when Paul appealed to be held in custody for the emperor's decision, I ordered him to be kept in custody until I could send him to Caesar. And Agrippa said to Festus, I would also like to hear the man tomorrow. And he said, you shall hear him. So you can see how Festus tries to present this as he tries to stand before him here and present his thoughts. Festus has this conversation with Agrippa. He expects legal issues. This is what he's expecting Paul to be charged with. There's something legally here that I need to make a decision about. But that's not what he hears. These are religious issues. These are things relative to the law, relative to their religion. And on top of that, they think that he talks about the death of Jesus and the resurrection of Jesus, and he really knew nothing about any of it. Figure that one. Okay? He just didn't have any background on it to feel good about that at all. Now, one note here that we want to bear in mind is Agrippa well understood both the Jews' religion and about Jesus. Like I said, he's part of the Herod family. It goes all the way back, if you think about it for a minute. Who's the one that's trying to kill all the babies when Jesus was born? There you go. Same family. So all the way through, they've known about this. It's been a part of their background all the way through. I put that last sentence on there, kind of an interesting thought. You can imagine him sitting there knowing what the law was all about and what they were doing. He probably cracked a smile on his face. It's just like saying, Festus, I can't believe you're that dumb. I just can't believe you don't know anything about this, you know. And so he probably, you know, and that's just a think so. But, you know, it just makes sense. He knows that Festus is clueless. And so that's what takes place. So as they get prepared for all of this, Festus has got a problem. Because after explaining to Agrippa the background of the case, as he understood it, Agrippa also wants to hear Paul. And the next day, Paul is brought to Festus and Agrippa so that he might have something to write concerning Paul. And that is so important because he's going to send send Paul all the way to Rome, and he needs to have his documents and his information neatly prepared and put together so when he gets there, Caesar understands what's going on and he looks good instead of not looking good. Because right now he doesn't look good. It's not going to be a good thing if he continues the way he's going. So that's what takes place as he puts this all together. So verse 23, and let's pick that up so we can see what's going on here. And so on the next day, when Agrippa had come together with Bernice amid great pomp, he had entered the auditorium and accompanied by the commanders and the prominent men of the city, and at the command of Festus, Paul's brought in. And Festus said, King Agrippa, and all you gentlemen here present with us, you behold this man before whom all the people of the Jews appealed to me, both in Jerusalem and here loudly, declaring that he ought not to live any longer. But I found that he had committed nothing worthy of death. And since he himself appealed to the emperor, I decided, I love this, I decided to send him. Really? Okay, I decided to send him. Yet I have nothing definite about him to write to my Lord. Therefore I have brought him before you and especially before you, King Agrippa, so that after the investigation has taken place, I may have something to write. For it seemed absurd to me in sending a prisoner not indicating also the charges against him. Makes perfect sense when you think about it. Festus is in a real spot with this situation. He's got nothing to write. He's got no reason to send him. Yet Paul's appealed to go to Caesar, and he's got to do that. And so it's a real situation for him. Chapter 26 will be the presentation that Paul makes to King Agrippa as this is all taking place, and we'll start on that on this coming Sunday, Lord willing. But the idea, and incidentally, this chapter 26, if you're keeping notes or whatever relative to this is the third time now that Paul has recorded in the book of Acts his account of conversion. You got chapter 9, and I think the other one's 22, I believe. Yes, 22, where he's before the Sanhedrin, and now this one. And all three accounts put together the conversions and the conversion of Paul, and little tidbits in each one of them help paint the entire picture of his conversion along that line. So that's what we'll do. We've got just a few minutes left. We've got time to do the questions on chapter 25 if you've got them. If you don't, I can give you Sunday. We can do it then. But I said let's just do it now and see what happens. Okay. Number one, where was Festus when the Jews spoke to him of Paul's case? Jerusalem. Yep. No. Remember he went up to Jerusalem, and then they sit down with him right there, real quick. No. He came from Caesarea, went up to Jerusalem.
Verse 1.
Yes, went up to Jerusalem from Caesarea. Verse 1. Good.
The question was, where was he? He was in Caesarea at the time.
Well, where was Festus when the Jews spoke to him about Paul's case? He didn't know what was going on until he got to Jerusalem. Because in verse 2 it says, after he got up to Jerusalem, then the chief priests and the leading men of the Jews brought charges against Paul. So he had to go from Caesarea to Jerusalem, and then they hit him with Paul's case. Does that work?
That's when he said that he cut preaching Christ to them.
Yeah, that's the whole problem.
Yeah.
That's the whole problem. So he starts out in Jerusalem, goes to Caesarea. I'm sorry, wrong. Starts in Caesarea and goes to, you got me tangled up now. Guy goes to Jerusalem, and that's where they get him. Could the Jews prove their accusations? No. Why did Festus ask Paul to be judged in Jerusalem?
It was Jews' favor.
They would attack him along the way.
That's true. What was the other one? I heard another one.
Trying to do the Jews a favor.
There you go. Trying to do the Jews a favor. Go ahead, Billy.
I'd like to go back to 2 and
All right.
make an observation of that.
Okay.
Is that when you go back to chapter 21, verse 27, you'll find that it was not Paul at all that was causing the turmoil there. It was the Jews that
Exactly.
actually started it.
Right.
Paul was doing nothing, and they all jumped up and began to accuse, so they were actually the ones guilty of causing the uproar.
Exactly. And of course, Lysias couldn't get a straight answer out of anybody.
Yeah.
So he's just got an organized mess to try to deal with, and trying to get something straightened out here about it. Would Paul have accepted capital punishment if he's worthy of death?
Yes.
Absolutely, he would have. Sure, he stated it that way. Why did King Agrippa hear of Paul's case?
He wanted to hear for himself.
True.
He appealed to Caesar.
Do what?
He appealed to Caesar.
Because he was a Roman.
Okay. All of the above so far. Really, what did he have to have? Why did he want King Agrippa to hear the case?
You could tell him whether it was right or not, what he was saying was right.
Look,
True.
He knew.
Keep going. You're getting closer.
He knew that King Agrippa would understand the laws. Though.
Yeah. And remember the verse we read, 23 and through 26, said that Festus might now have something to write and give reason for why he's sending him. That's the real deal.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the real deal.
the question is, why did King Agrippa hear of
Above Paul's.
Is that supposed to be Paul? Because it says false.
It's supposed to be Paul.
It's supposed to be Paul's. What says what? What does yours say?
Faults.
Yeah, it does say false on there,
Huh.
but it should be.
You mean out of 50-some pages I got a typo?
You
Man.
good.
Well, unless you wrote the book.
I had it redone. You ought to see what we had to work with. But yeah, okay. Yeah, it's Paul's case, and he's hearing it so that, first of all, I mean, everything that everybody said is correct. Agrippa would have had more knowledge of it, but the long and the short of it, and the bottom line is Festus needed something to write down to send to his boss to make it look good, and he didn't have it at this point.
I looked at it this way, seeing that he is the king with all the power, and the question just leads me to think that it's all up to King Agrippa. Verse 22 is simply because he wanted to hear it.
Because he was what?
Because he wanted to hear it.
Yeah, that's Agrippa does.
Being who the king was in his place and the way the
Yep.
question is, it leads to, I mean, it was all his decision, boiled down to.
Yeah.
So I guess I don't know.
But the why he hears about it's on Festus' shoulders, because Festus doesn't have a reason, and so the why he's trying to get Agrippa to understand it, and Agrippa wants to hear it so he can do something with it too. Go ahead.
When Felix or Festus lays out the fact that he's talked about this man dead, which is Christ, and that when I looked at it, the only thing I could see here was just accusation or questions, like matters of question. And to me, he's like, all right, I'll get King Agrippa to look at this, and he could pinpoint maybe the laws of this. Is this a law? Is this a law that's been broken, or is it just a matter of question?
Right, and time element involved as far as, and not trying to justify his thoughts and what he says, but we're at AD 60 at this point, and this guy's a Roman. He's not a Jew. So we're 30 years, they're 30 years after the fact. And he's a Roman trying to look in on this and trying to figure out, it's possible. It's possible under the Roman situation, he didn't know anything about Jesus. I mean, it's very possible. But being a Jew, he knew in Agrippa's case that Agrippa was very familiar with it. And so he would have been able to bring the focus to it that could be brought. And that's why he's asking him to take a look at it or to hear it. And Agrippa is anxious to do that as well. Okay? Tell you what, let's just stop it right there. I'll mark that question. We'll pick up with those because we're out of time now. And we'll pick up at question 6 Sunday morning. We'll wrap those up, and then we'll get into chapter 26 then on Sunday morning. Any thoughts, ideas, questions? Good. I think it's, you know, this whole thing as we get closer and closer to Rome, it gets very interesting as to what all takes place here. But we appreciate it.